to Kelly for a roll call.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Salvage is excused. Vice Chair Robertson.
Here.
Commissioner McLean.
Here.
Commissioner Prenivo is also excused. Commissioner Galka.
Here.
Commissioner Port.
Here.
And Commissioner Bracken.
Here.
Okay, thank you. And we will forego the flag salute for this evening and move right into minutes. Planning commissioners, you should have received 2 sets of minutes. We'll address them separately. The August 19th Planning Commission minutes. Any additions, corrections? Kelly, I think I have one for that one. Under item number 1, call to order, flag salute, it says Vice Chair Robertson called the meeting to order. I actually think that was Jeremy.
Ha. Yep. Sorry.
Any other additions or corrections? Because of a correction, then we'll need a motion and a vote to approve the minutes. Anybody prepared to make a motion? Everybody looks like they're muted. If so, if somebody's making a motion, I'm not hearing them.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for both meetings.
Okay, let's just do the one first, and then we'll go to the second set of minutes.
August 19th.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes for August 19th.
Okay, is there a second?
A second. Second.
And that's, Dave, that's with corrections, am I correct? Your motion?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, moving on then to September 16th minutes. Any additions or corrections? Hearing none, then those minutes will stand approved as presented. All right, we have come to our portion of citizen comments. We're going to go ahead and go through that, although I don't think we have any tonight, but I'll give anybody an opportunity. If there is somebody with us that would like to do a comment at this point, not on the agenda.
Hey, Don, real quick, I think we have to approve the September 16 minutes too. We can make a motion to approve that?
No, there was no corrections on that. So that would be approved without a motion.
Thanks.
All right, so citizens' comments. And hearing none, we'll move along. We have 2 files tonight. We have planning file AR20-11, an administrative review, and planning file CPMA-20-01 comprehensive plan map amendment request. Before we step into those, I'm going to kick it over to our legal guy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm the legal guy. Tonight's hearings will be pursuant to the quasi-judicial hearing procedure set forth in 197.763 in Oregon law. At the commencement of the hearing, all commission members will be asked to announce any ex parte contact or conflicts of interest. Ex parte contact is contact with anyone outside the meeting or with the property itself regarding the question or issue before the council. If you have any questions on either an ex parte contact or a conflict of interest, please bring it up and I'll be happy to address it. We will start out with the staff report. After the staff report, we'll allow questions of staff by the commission. We'll then have public testimony in the format that has been noticed in the notice of the action. The public testimony, audience members or anybody that's on the call may provide oral or written testimony concerning issues relevant to the hearing. Recognize that all testimony or evidence must be directed towards the criteria that is described in the staff report or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulations. Please note that failure to raise an issue, including a constitutional issue or other issues related to the proposed conditions of approval, if any, accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to those issues, precludes any appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Please state your name and your address when you testify. We will go through the procedure of the applicant will go first, as it is their burden of proof. We'll then open it up to any opponents of the application and then rebuttal if necessary by the applicant. We'll then close the public hearing and all discussion will be among the commission, which has various options tonight. With that, do any city councilors have any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest to disclose?
All right, thank you. So with that, then we'll open planning file AR-20-11 administrative review and ask the planning commissioners if there's any ex parte contact, conflict of interest, or bias that needs to be addressed. Hearing none, then we will turn it over to Kelly for staff report.
Thank you, sir. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Oh, okay, there we go. So good evening again. Before you tonight is an administrative review for the proposed development and operation of a preschool on the Lebanon Community School District site at 485 South 5th Street in the public use zone. The development would consist of a 4,900 square foot preschool building. The building would include 4 classrooms, an administrative office, and restroom facilities. And each classroom would have a separate exit to the exterior to meet building and fire code standards. The intended use is to run 8 different preschool classes each day, conducting a morning cohort and an afternoon cohort with 16 to 20 students per classroom, or up to 80 students per cohort. There would be 1 teacher per classroom, along with 1 to 2 additional instructional assistants in each room. For administrative functions, it is anticipated that 1 administrative assistant and 1 support staff would be able to operate the office functions for the preschool. There are minimum development standards provided for the public use zone for this type of development. The minimum front setback and street side setback is 10 feet for one and 15 for the other. And this building meets the requirements with a 28-foot setback on Rose Street and a 124-foot setback off of 5th Street. The side and rear minimums setbacks are also far exceeded in this proposal, with a 113-foot side setback and a 330-foot rear setback. For traffic circulation, there are 2 points of entry, one off of 5th Street here and one off of Rose Street here. And with either entry point, there would be a minimum vehicle stacking area for at least 9 vehicles with straight access points to the front of the school. So if one was to access off of 5th Street, you could stack 9 vehicles along this corridor here until you get to the front of the school. However, if additional stacking is required, you can loop through the parking lot of the existing school district site to facilities. There is a condition of approval that is included as part of the proposal that requires the school district to have a plan for vehicle stacking purposes to make sure that it does not enter onto the public right-of-way. And then finally, for parking purposes, an analysis was conducted for the entirety of the site. And with all the combined uses, including the administrative function, the preschool, and the bus depot, a total parking requirement is 73 parking spaces, and the site currently maintains 80 spaces. And as such, there's no modification required to the site. And so with that, I'll conclude my report and answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Kelly? All right, seeing none, then we will open the public testimony portion of our hearing and invite the applicant or the applicant's representative to step up, identify themselves and their address, please.
Okay, good evening. My name is Brian Vendetta, address 63 East Ash Street in the Lebanon School District. As Kelly presented in her staff report, It is a fairly small 4,900 square foot preschool that they're proposing on an existing admin campus. The majority of the infrastructure is in place. The parking, the drive lanes, utilities. There'll be some minor modifications with respect to additional pedestrian facilities and potentially some landscaping. Other than that, the site will stay as is with the exception of the new building. And with that, I would tell you that we have read through the proposed conditions of approval. We understand them. We're willing to accept them as written. And we'd ask that you'd grant approval this evening. And I'd be more than happy to answer any questions if you have some.
Any questions for Brian? Okay, thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Seeing none, is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Hearing none, then we will close the public testimony portion of our hearing. All further discussion will be amongst planning commissioners and staff. So did, in your review of this application, planning commissioners, did you see anything that needed addressed? Or do you felt the criteria has been met?
This is Samuel. I felt that the criteria has been met. I think we did a good job in saying, hey, there's a minimum of parking spaces that are needed, vision clearance, trees and shrubbery, and everything else seems fine.
Okay, thank you, Samuel. Anybody else have a comment? All right, is anybody prepared to bring forward a motion?
I will.
Okay,
I move that the planning commission approve A20-11 as written. And blah, blah, blah.
is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, all of
Can
those
we
in
verify
favor?
who's seconding? I'm so sorry, Don. Can we verify who's seconding there? Thanks, Josh.
Josh? Okay. All right, all of those in favor of the motion, then please identify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposition by saying by nay? Opposition by saying nay? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then we will move on to our second public hearing tonight, planning file CPMA-20-01. Trey, do we need to address different criteria for this one, or are we good to go?
Well, I'd like to reiterate just the specific portion that all witnesses need to state their name and their address, and that they need to, any comments need to be directed towards the criteria described in the staff report or in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation. And note that a failure to raise an issue, including constitutional issues or other issues related to the proposed conditions of approval, if any, accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford this commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issues, precludes any appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals. With that, we will follow the same procedures as the previous hearing.
Okay, thank you. And I'm asking the planning commissioners if there's any ex parte contact, conflict of interest, or bias. Hearing none, then we will toss it over to Kelly for a staff report.
Thank you, sir. So good evening again. Before you tonight is a proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan map designation for the property located on the west side of Stortz Hill, north of Vaughan Lane. The property is currently within the county unincorporated area, but is within the city's urban growth boundary. I guess to do some really quick defining here for the members of the public, you have the city limit boundaries, which are all the area and jurisdiction that's annexed into the city and managed by the city and uses city utilities and infrastructure. And then you have the city's urban growth boundary, and that urban growth boundary is set to identify the areas that are anticipated for the city to grow and urbanize over a period of time. And then you have the county unincorporated area, which is outside of the urban growth boundary, which is preserved for farming and timber and open space. And so anything that's within the urban growth boundary, it is within county jurisdiction currently, but eventually is intended to fall within city jurisdiction and to eventually be developed. So that's the difference of the three pies that we're currently looking at. And so what we're currently situated in is a property that is in county unincorporated area, but within the city's urban growth boundary. At this time, there is no proposal to annex it into the city and fall under the city's jurisdiction. And there's no proposal to change the current county zoning designation. The applicant would have to move forward with that at their own behest if this application were to move forward. And there's also no development proposal at this time. The property is currently designated with two different land use designations within the comprehensive plan. The northern 16 acres of the property are currently designated residential mixed density, and the remaining southern portion of the property for 55 acres is currently designated as industrial. The applicant is requesting consideration to amend the comprehensive plan designation for the southern 55 acres of the property and change that designation from industrial to residential mixed density. So basically, to narrow down the question to its most basic form, before the Planning Commission this evening is the question for this particular site: what is a more suitable use upon future urbanization? Is it industrial or is it residential? So with that consideration, the rest of the presentation will provide information on the site's characteristics. For its surrounding uses, to the west is farmland that is located within the county and outside of the urban growth boundary, so it is not intended for urbanization or future annexation in the city, unless the urban growth boundary were to be amended. For properties to the north, it includes industrial zone properties that are accessed off of Airport Road up in this area here. For properties to the northeast are residentially zoned properties within county unincorporated areas within the city's UGB or urban growth boundary. And to the east are residential uses within the city. And then finally, to the south are existing residential and farmland uses within the urban growth boundary with a comprehensive plan designation of industrial. The subject property is located, surprisingly, within three different overlay zones. First, along the northern portion of the property runs Oak Creek, which is identified as a riparian and protection overlay zone and floodplain zone. So this area here that's highlighted in blue on the screen. Although the property contains portions of area within that overlay zone, the remainder of the property not highlighted in blue falls outside of that zone and could be developed without consideration of that minimal overlay protection area on the northern part. Next, the subject property is also largely impacted by the airport overlay zone. The property in its entirety is located within the airport safety zone, which could impact building height construction based off of the property's terrain. In addition, excluding the westernmost portion of the property, most of the property falls into the airport approach zone, surface zone, which further restricts development activity. Specifically for industrial properties, it states that no new industrial use shall, as part of its regular operation, cause emissions such as smoke, dust, or steam that could obscure visibility within the airport approach surfaces, except upon demonstration supported by substantial evidence that mitigation measures imposed as part of the conditions of approval will reduce the potential safety risk to an insignificant level. So basically, if an industrial use were to operate on this site, they would need to do a number of studies to demonstrate that they won't impact that area for the airport purposes. And for residential uses, there's a restriction on housing densities beyond the outer edges of the airport runway protection zone. And for the subject property, within the airport surface area, the maximum residential density that can be built is up to 4 units to the acre. As such, if the residential mixed density designation were approved for the site, the property, if it were annexed in the future, largely would be developed at a much smaller density, and the denser development types, such as apartments and townhomes, would not be eligible on the site because of this airport overlay restriction. So the site would largely be restricted to that lower density designation. For public facilities, as part of the evaluation of the proposed comprehensive plan designation, an evaluation of the city's facilities, including sewer, water, storm drainage, and transportation is required. For city sewer, there's currently no city or sewer infrastructure available near the subject property. However, upon completion of the West Side Interceptor project, which is shown here on the screen, there would be a sewer main installed along portions of Stoltz Hill Road within the general vicinity of the subject sites. So upon completion of this the segment of the West Side Interceptor, the city's sewer service would be available in the vicinity, and the subject site may be able to be annexed and developed, but it would need to be annexed prior to connection to city utility services. For water, there's currently no city water services available near the subject property. However, per the city's water master plan, there is a long-range planning project that would provide an extension of a water main along Vaughn Road and a water main along Stoltz Hill Road to connect and provide availability along the frontage of the subject property. The connection line next to the subject property would be 12 inches, a 12-inch line, and the city engineer has identified that that line width would be acceptable and appropriate for either industrial or residential development. And finally, for storm drainage along Stoltz Hill Road, there's an existing drainage ditch, and upon development of the property in any instance of residential or industrial nature, storm drainage permits would be required to meet state law. For transportation, when the comprehensive plan was approved in 2008, there was a corresponding transportation plan, or TSP, that identified a bypass route that you can see here on the screen. That bypass route would connect the industrial properties throughout the western side of the city to a designated truck route. This bypass route would have connected the subject property to the truck route system and to all of the other industrial properties on that western portion of the city. However, in 2018, the city adopted a new transportation system plan, and this plan removed the bypass as it was deemed unnecessary to accommodate the traffic patterns for future growth based off of a modified plan for other routes to handle the traffic more appropriately. The result was the removal of the bypass, and that cut off the subject property from the rest of the industrial core on the western perimeter of the city, and it also restricted access for the property to Stoltz Hill Road with no direct access to any designated truck route. Per the current TSP, the portion of Stoltz Hill Road along the subject property north of airport is currently classified as a collector, and any future function designation would be considered a minor arterial. With the current and future classifications of Stoltz Hill Road as a collector and minor arterial, the street is intended to accommodate either industrial or residential development, and so the residential development could be accommodated if so. However, the intersection of Stoltz Hill Road and Airport Road, this intersection is the future site of a traffic signal that was recently approved and designed as part of other project off of Airport. But that intersection would not be modified to be a more traditional 90-degree design. So Stoltz Hill Road is not proposed to be realigned to meet Airport Road and it would be at an irregular angle instead of the traditional 90 degrees. This design would not impact residential traffic maneuvers. However, it has not been evaluated whether or not the angle of the intersection would constrict industrial traffic maneuvers and whether or not that would impact the viability of the site for future industrial uses. But our city engineer might be able to comment on that a little further a little later. And so that discusses the traffic impacts. Next up is, as part of the comprehensive plan, there is a buildable lands inventory that's conducted to identify whether there's sufficient acreage for each of the different types of land uses to accommodate the anticipated growth. And it also identifies the level of deficit or excess of available land within that designation. Per the evaluation and per state law, buildable land inventory is defined to include vacant, partially vacant, or prime land for redevelopment that's not environmentally constrained. But here is the lovely kicker. Environmentally constrained lands only specify steep slopes, properties within a floodplain, or properties containing habitat of endangered species. It explicitly excludes wetlands to be considered as part of the definition of constrained. And so I know that a large number of properties in our city for industrial use is inundated with wetlands, but that is not a consideration of what's considered constrained land. And so based off of this evaluation, for both industrial and residential uses, as you can see on the screen, there is an excess of acreage to accommodate either of those uses. The data on the screen provides information about the available excess and how the proposed modification would impact the remaining acreage. So if it were approved to change, the available industrial inventory would decrease to 349 acres approximately, and the availability of surplus residential land would increase to 353 acres. So finally, this application was originally noticed for a public hearing back in September. As part of the original notification period, the city received quite a few comments, including a petition that was signed by a number of the neighbors. All of the comments received were included in the agenda packet and posted to the city's website at least 7 days prior to the hearing to provide more time to review those comments. That packet was also distributed to the planning commissioners, who have all had the opportunity to read the agenda in its entirety. However, to assist for discussion purposes only, the items on the screen were recurring topics of consideration within each of the comments. We also did receive a revised comment this afternoon from Mr. Spencer Johnson, which was forwarded to the Planning Commission for consideration as well. And so hopefully you have had time to review that additional comment. So with that, I will conclude my staff report. Sorry for the long-winded one, and answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Any questions for staff? Okay, hearing none.
Kelly?
Yeah, go ahead.
Don, I have a quick question here. What is the closest railroad track to that area?
Oh, that's a very good question. It's quite a ways away. I think on the other side of South Stadium.
It'd be Hansard or Russell Drive.
Yeah. So north end of the city or the very east end of the city.
So impractical to run railway that way?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see how you'd ever do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Kelly, what was the question? I had a hard time hearing it.
So sorry. We'll ask everybody in the room to speak up a little bit through the math. The question was where the closest rail line was in the city, and the answer was at the very north end of the city near Hansard, or at the east end of the city towards the river.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, then we will open the public testimony portion of our hearing. and invite the applicant or the applicant's representative to step forward, state their name, their address, and provide their testimony.
Good evening. My name is Kyle Latimer. I'm representing the owners on this application, 873 Grove Street. I want to thank you for your time and thank Kelly for the thorough application review. She hit all the high points that I have outlined in the narrative, and I agree with the outcome of the narrative. The staff report, just to reiterate a few things, the subject tax lot is a total of 71 acres. The subject of this application is for the south 55 acres. The north 16 is already zoned, or not zoned, but will be zoned upon annexation as mixed density residential. The south 55 acres is, as you know, slated for industrial use. We'd like to see that match the north 16 acres as mixed residential upon annexation, should that happen. At this time, there's no proposal to annex. There's no proposal to change the county zoning, and there's no proposal to submit a specific site development plan. This is the first step, and as you know, anything beyond that would have to come before this board again. I think the question here is whether or not you'd rather see residential development opposed to industrial development. As Kelly outlined in her staff report, this has been an urban growth boundary since, I believe, 1980, so it's not a matter of whether or not it'll be developed. It's a matter of what the neighbors will be out there. And I thought, from my perspective, as a former neighbor to the area, that I would rather see residents as opposed to the slew of potential industrial uses on the property. And I think I'd like a chance to rebut the comments later in the meeting, but specifically, one that I saw recurring common was the traffic, and I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I do know that the city has this slated as a minor arterial for future classification, possibly a speed reduction or moving the current 45-mile-per-hour speed zone further south, maybe to the crest of the hill on Stoltz Hill, south of Vaughn, something to that effect. And then something that's somewhat subjective, but pertinent to this application, I believe, is the current uses on the northeast, east, southeast, and south are all currently residential uses, even though a portion of those are slated for industrial use. So that's another argument I believe that should be made, that this is best fit as an industrial, as a residential use property opposed to industrial. The facility plans, Kelly went through that pretty detailed. I know that the West Side Interceptor's slated for within 500 feet of the property. There's a 16-inch and 12-inch water main slated for future construction to the property. And then we already talked about traffic concerns. I think that's where I'd like to leave it at this point, until I hear some of the comments from the opposition and see what kind of agreement we can come to. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and I'd like to field any questions the planning commissioners have, if there are any.
Okay, any questions for Kyle? Okay, thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the application? If so, identify yourself. Okay,
Just
seeing
to
none.
clarify as well, that this is an opportunity for anybody, any member of the public to be able to speak in favor of the application in case there's anybody there.
Okay, hearing none, then we will move to second part of our public testimony, those that are in opposition. And before we jump into that, just a reminder, the request here tonight is for a comp plan map amendment. That is the only thing that we're considering. We don't have an annexation request or a development request. So I would ask anybody providing testimony to stay on topic for that request only. And with that, Kelly, you have a list of at least a couple of people that want to step in and speak in opposition.
Yes, sir. We had 2 people that registered ahead of time to speak on this application, so we'll start with them. And then I do see a couple people that have signed in that have not registered, so we'll give them the opportunity after that. So to start, we'll just go with the first name on the list here. If we can have Mr. Richard Lord unmute himself, introduce himself, and then go ahead and speak on the matter. Rick, you want to mute yourself there? There we go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kyle Latimer was kind enough to come out to the neighborhood out here. I reside at 2900 Stoltz Hill Road, and we came out here back in June. The idea was to get into more of a rural atmosphere, and a lot of the people that live here feel the same way. We like the rural county, if you will, rural part of the town. And so we enjoy the wildlife and so on and so forth. Don't particularly care about the traffic so much. We had a long discussion about that, which really doesn't need to be rehashed right now. One of the things that I do want to bring up, though, is we talked, I know Kyle had said this, that he would like to see the property go to 1-acre lots. And well, that is if I'm not mistaken, an RR1 zone. Is that correct?
That would be a county zoning designation.
Okay.
And so that is something that would be out there. I do not know what the RR1 equates to, Carl. I'm not sure if you want to speak on that to clarify really quick.
Yeah, if I may. So the proposal wouldn't be to keep it in the county at rural residential 1-acre minimum, as there's little to no chance for septic approvals on that scale. It would be to bring it into the city with city utilities, and our ideal layout would be something close to 1-acre parcels. And that's not something I can really say for sure, just because of a lot of things like, you know, market demand and construction costs. But at this point, that's where the owner's intent is headed. So not the county, but rather city mixed density residential with the density of 1-acre parcels.
And since the development is not under consideration tonight, that's not a considering factor of the Planning Commission's decision-making process.
So also just a point of order, once the opposition testimony is completed, we will give the applicant an opportunity to respond. So go ahead with your testimony if you have more.
Are you speaking with me, sir?
Yes, if you have more to testify.
Yeah, I think that you guys have received, I know that Spencer Johnson had dropped off a circulation that we had gone out, or he had actually gone out, opposing this change in the application, or opposing the application change, due to the fact that we weren't guaranteed, there was no guarantee what was going to end up out there. Mixed density means anything to, you know, that, in other words, we could end up with apartment complexes back there and everything, and this is right on our backyard for all intents and purposes. And that's what we are against. We don't want to see that happen. Now, when Mr. Latimer came to the meeting here in our area, and it has to do with the zone application change, it was brought to our attention about here, or I did live out there, and I would like to see that. The problem is there was no guarantee that we could have the 1 acre lot division, I think, which is county RR1, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, neither here nor there. We've submitted several forms several opposition pieces of paper to you guys, and I think it's like in the numbers about 38 or so that you guys got, and there's some pretty unhappy people about all this. We're already unhappy with the fact that we've got the traffic issue out here on Stoltz Hill Road, and finding that it's going to be, a minor arterial highway at some point. I've seen this happen before, and we live here on this road, and it's already really bad. So what is that going to do to us over here? That's why we have so many things that are against us, or against this whole thing happening, and it comes down to, I call it the secondhand smoke syndrome. And whatever is done out there, it's going to affect us. Just the someday down the road. Well, he didn't buy it so he could sit on it and raise ducks. He bought it so he could develop it, and we know that. And so there's going to be a time to where it's going to be construction. The construction will last for 55 acres. Who knows how long? It could be phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and on and on and on. How long does that happen? So then we have that noise that we have to deal with. Then we have the traffic, the people moving in, the trucks, and the whole 9 yards. It really impacts our life. This is the secondhand smoke syndrome that I speak of. And there is nothing in it for us. Zero. Nothing in it for us. We get absolutely bupkis out of this whole thing. And that's what we're upset about. Not that we're standing out there with our hands out, wanting something in return, but the fact that this is being considered out here, we just want to be out in the rural area of the town, if you will, and enjoy life and the wildlife and so on and so forth. And we're hearing right now that that's in jeopardy. That's what we're against.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lord? All right. Thank you. Kelly?
Next up, we have Mr. Spencer Johnson.
Hey, it's been shown as Sage. That's my daughter because I'm on her computer. But this is Spencer Johnson. I'm at 2888 Stoltz Hill. My mom is right next to me. We have a shared living situation. And so hopefully it's okay if when I'm finished, she can speak from our family's household. I guess our biggest concern is when we invest, we pretty much invested everything we have to be in the spot. My mom grew up in Lebanon, high school, graduation, all that, and we're coming back to Lebanon to settle in and try to remain here. And so when we picked the spot, we picked it for the reasons of the rural setting. And I know that, I guess I wish I could be in the heads of the commission to know how bound and determined the commission is to develop this area. Because if it's bound and determined, we're up against these boundaries that are urban, the development boundaries. I understand that, but I guess I'm looking at it going, I talked to a lot of residents, and I think out of the 38 papers got turned in, 2 I never made it into. One of them said, well, I don't care. I'd rather move to Portland anyway. It's like, well, go to Portland then, because this is not Portland, this is Lebanon. And everybody else is like, yeah, I did not come to this side of town to have more houses around me. We're on the edge. There's a feeling of ruralness to it, and that's really appreciated. And I know that Kyle grew up in the area and appreciates that too. And I heard too about the difference between residential and industrial. I understand that argument too. And I did hear an explanation that, is it true that if maybe someone can answer this now, that apartments cannot be developed in this area? Is that correct with the zoning?
Sir, would you like me to answer that?
Yeah, whoever knows to answer that, yes. I thought I heard you say that, that because of
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
Okay. So if I may, as part of the presentation, the property is in what's called the airport overlay zone. as part of the airport overlay zone, a very large portion of that property is in the approach area. So the area in which the airplanes descend rapidly to then land or take off. And so because of that area, there's a restriction on the densities that can occur and the heights that can occur. And so in the areas in which you all live and then down towards the south, because they're in that area, they have a restriction of up to a maximum of 4 dwelling units to the acre. Maximum. That means that in that airport overlay zone, where that approach surface is, they cannot build apartments, they cannot build townhomes. It would be that lower density development.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard you say. So I was checking on the apartment, the specific apartment type of building.
Correct.
Thank you. Thanks. So I guess, and like I said, Kyle did come out and talk to us. I appreciate him coming out there. I guess the concern I had was Kyle said that the intention was 1 acre pieces, which I'll be honest with you, I think the people around here would be okay, go 1 acre pieces. But when you apply for, for residential mixed density, that's not 1 acre pieces. And I can't see, with money at the table to be made, tax money coming into the city, and then a developer's, viewpoint, of course, you want to maximize, get all the money you can out of it. I can't see it staying at 1 acres once the property's put up for sale. As Kyle said, he wasn't planning on being the developer, so he would then be the seller of it. And then whoever moves in behind that can take the same properties and split it up and re-put the lines, and then it's back to, it wouldn't be 1 acre because of the zoning would be allowed to be different. And that's, of course, intentions. I appreciate that, but the intentions don't mean anything if it's zoned something different. But the step, it starts here and that's where it goes. And so if it's mixed residential, that's where it's going to end up. It will not be 1 acre pieces, is where I see that. And that's probably the people that I talk to, that's the worst nightmare, is small little lots out there with a bunch of houses and all the traffic goes with it. I think there's even less of a fear of industrial, the people I talk to, than the mixed, the residential mixed density. So anyway, I think that's the main part about honesty. It's just that it's a little frustrating to invest everything we have in a place. And I know this is like there's more to worry about than the sentiment and these, little pretty pictures that I had on there with the geese. But that was 2 hours before this meeting. There was a flock of geese. I got to go out and see them. A little before that were the buck and the doe. And that's when you put the row of houses out there, that's gone for us. I get that, understand that when a city develops, those things happen. But I guess still, I can't help but say, I don't want that to happen to what my investment was. That's what I want to say. Is it okay if I was under one name? Can my mom speak as part of our residents of our house?
Sure.
Thank you.
I just want to speak to what I call a sanctuary. I have very well enjoyed a multitude of birds, and I think I will read off some of here. Canadian geese, of course, like he said, I counted almost 50 today. And that was on their way, I suppose, somewhere else. But snowy white egrets I've seen, western red herons, wild ducks, eagles, pheasant, wild turkeys, and multiple kinds, really lots of birds, and deer, not naming all of the little animals that are around. I really enjoy, and my husband, I both enjoy the animal life because of wetlands here that we look towards, but our view of the butte, my personal beauty, to be taken away, and hope not. So yeah, I would really enjoy, miss the wildlife.
For the record, ma'am, could you state your name, please?
Mildred Johnson.
Okay, and you're at the same address?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think that represents our house. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, and Kelly, that was the two that you had registered. Is there anybody else in the room that wish to speak in opposition of the application? Not seeing any, then we will toss it back to the applicant. If the applicant prefers to present any rebuttal testimony.
Yeah, well, this is Kyle Latimer again. So we briefly spoke about traffic, which that came up again. I don't have an easy solution for that, honestly. Maybe I could speak to the wildlife. So the north 4 acres of the property is encumbered by a Bonneville power easement, which basically means nothing can be done on that north 4 acres. There's a national wetland inventory on the north piece, which is at a minimum 5 to 6 acres, and then the floodplain impacts 7 acres. So the likelihood of the north, 10 to 15 acres ever being developed is, I'd say, slim to none, just because it'd be cost prohibitive to mitigate all those natural resources. Not to say it couldn't be done, but maybe that'll leave some of your concerns regarding the wildlife issues. And then the density, to speak to Spencer's comment about the 1 acre parcel being out of our control after it's zoned mixed density residential. For that, I would say even a low density residential city classification is higher intensity or higher density than what the airport overlay allows. So that 4 dwellings per acre is pretty restrictive, actually, as far as zoning densities go. So that would be the governing factor regarding density, regardless of whether it's mixed density residential or low density residential. I think the only reason we jumped to mixed density was because the north 16 acres is already classified as that, rather than having a split zone piece of property like it is now. I think that's the major concerns I heard, and unless you guys heard something else you'd like me to speak to.
Nope, I think that covers it. Right, thank you, Kyle. With that, then we will close the public testimony portion of our hearing. All further discussion will be amongst planning commissioners and staff. So, Kelly, just a procedure question, I guess. Typically, the planning commission overlooks or oversees the application. If the application meets all the criteria, we're duty bound to approve it. In this case, however, because it's a request, we're talking about a comp plan map amendment. We have some discretion. Is that correct?
There is absolutely discretion. The decision criteria is regarding compliance with the city's facilities. It's regarding compliance with the city's comprehensive plan as it exists. And so you do have discretion in this consideration of whether or not you feel that the application meets the purpose and intent behind the comprehensive plan as well. And that's stipulated in the decision criteria as it's shown in the agenda report.
Okay, so planning commissioners, what's your thoughts? Obviously, the question before us is the property best suited as industrial or is it best suited as residential?
Well, I'd like to make some comments, and let me get this mask off so I can speak. To be honest with you, I'm leaning towards residential, and for a couple of reasons on that. An industrial park without access to a railway would require everything to be brought in and out with trucks. And I know what trucks do to a neighborhood. I know what it does to the roads and the streets, and the creation of potholes and the noise I know what an industrial park creates as far as pollution and noise and dust and you know, unclean areas and streets and stuff piled up. So I'm leaning towards residential. I think it is a better fit than industrial. And with the change of the TSP plan in 2018, it just more practical fit for a residential instead of an industrial. You know, I could just imagine what heavy truck traffic would do to that area without some major improvements to the roads and the streets. Another concern that I have is the city accommodating the growth for future housing, which we are in a crisis mode on that. And I think that the importance of more houses or more industrial plants, I mean, there's our choices. It's going to go one way or the other. It's going to go industrial or residential. And I just think that residential just makes more sense. It's a better fit. And that's my opinion. Unless, you know, somebody can say something or do something to convince me that that it's not, I think that residential is just a better fit.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Any of the other commissioners have some thoughts?
Hey, Don, this is Samuel, can I add on that?
You bet, jump in.
You know what, I went basic on this, Don. I'm just gonna read this verbatim. I know we all know it, but I'm looking at, you know, the development code. And, you know, I kind of went back to urban growth boundaries and, you know, and we all know what it is. Urban growth boundaries identify separate urbanizable land. And it says, you know, our urban growth boundary is a boundary line that encompasses the area surrounding a city that is intended for future urban development related to the city. You know, and as you go down a little bit, there's the three main points. It's determined that it's necessary and suitable for future urban uses, can be served by urban services and facilities, and are needed to expansion of the urban area, right? It meets those three criteria. So along with what our last commissioner said, hey, do we look at, this urban development, or do we look at, you know, a different type of development and what's better suited? And I also believe that not only is it in the urban growth boundary, but it can be served and it's expanding, right? So it meets the criteria. And I look at the argument for our long-term residents of Lebanon, where they say, well, you know, the NIMBY argument, right? The not in my backyard argument. But we look at the development code and it doesn't meet the criteria. I show that it meets the criteria, and I'm more suited for residential and new neighbors. Yes, there might be more traffic, but I'd rather have this than smog or loud trucks, which are going to cause traffic, or what are we looking at here? The lesser of two evils. I think that looking at the birds and all that stuff is great, but is it in the urban growth boundary? Does it serve the need of the community long term? I'm thinking it meets their criteria so far.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for bringing up that point of the urban growth boundary. When that line was drawn in 1980, it was with the intent that at some point that property would be developed. In 1980, the city fathers, or the people that put that together at that point, thought that that would be a great area for industrial. As times have changed, I kind of tend to agree with you. It appears that that may not be the best point for industrial, especially now that the bypass has been taken off the books. Speaking from a trucker's perspective, I used to do that many, many years ago. The intersection at Airport Road and Stoltz Hill would be very, very difficult for a large truck. It's not impossible to realign that, but at this point, that would be difficult. So I tend to agree with both of you that have spoke. It appears at this point in time, residential development inside the urban growth boundary, at this point anyway, might be the best use of the property. That's my opinion. Any of the other commissioners wish to speak up?
Yeah, this is Joshua. And I agree with all three of you. And as I'm looking at this map, I'm kind of surprised actually when it was originally drawn that there's just this random piece of residential mixed density that goes in between these two industrial zones. And I mean, as we're looking at the map as well, we all know there's already neighborhoods to the east. It just seems like a more reasonable transition. And as Dave pointed out, and Don as well, to make this area an industrial zone over here just doesn't quite make sense to me. And I was kind of surprised actually to hear from some of the opposition that they were more concerned about residential mixed density than they were industrial. To me, I mean, that would seem backwards. But again, that's just my opinion.
Okay. Thank you, Joshua. Josh, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm on board with the rest of you guys. I drive that road pretty much daily, and you know, they're putting in all the new houses to the south up on the hill, and as I drive by, I just can't see it being an industrial area. It's just everything around it, you know, it just, you know, especially with the airport approach, you know, the density restrictions that are on it. I definitely think that would be the best fit.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to make one comment. Instead of coming back before the planning commission with the next step or phase that the applicant was talking about, I don't understand why the applicant didn't just ask for an annexation now instead of putting it off, because we know that's going to be the next step. And I'm just wondering why you just didn't go ahead and apply for that while they were at it.
Okay, we've closed the public hearing portion, so would that answer make a difference in your decision, Dave?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, is anybody
Don,
prepared to go ahead?
I just want to say, you know, I recognize, you know, what the public is saying here. And I'd hate to say, look at it from the lesser of two evils, kind of like Commissioner Galko was saying. But I think the public has a, you know, again, I'm just looking at the black and white. I see what they're saying, and hey, maybe it'd be better for them if nothing was being developed here. I understand what they're saying. However, something is going to be developed, whether it's industrial or residential, and we have to look at what might be better suited for the area in the time being. It's in the urban growth development. It's bound to happen, and now it is happening. What do we think is better for the community? And I just, you know, I understand what they're saying, and yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, thank you. Is anybody prepared to make a motion?
I will.
Okay.
I recommend the city council or the Lebanon Planning Commission approve the proposed comprehensive plan map amendment CPMA-20-01 to modify the comprehensive plan designation from industrial to residential mixed density.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed, please say nay. Okay, motion carries unanimously. One point that I would make to those in the room and those on YouTube, the approval that we just gave is simply a comp plan map amendment. As Samuel mentioned just a moment ago, there are more steps. There's an annexation step. And then if the applicant elects, there would be a development stage that, and both of those would come back to the Planning Commission. So this is not the end of the topic. This is only the beginning.
And if I may add on another little piece of that too, this is actually just a recommendation of the Planning Commission to the City Council, which means that there will actually be a second hearing on even just this particular item before the City Council. A public notice will be distributed to all members of the public that have participated in this process, and the regular notice that goes out is through the regular process as well, of the date and time of that. So there will be a second hearing on this item as well.
Okay, good.
Before
Thank
the
you,
City
Kelly.
Council.
All right, moving on. Item number 6 on our agenda, commission business and comments. Kelly?
Thank you, sir. So as I'm sure all of you know, we are now under a statewide governor's freeze order in terms of COVID restriction purposes. That's why we're all currently wearing masks while we're doing this meeting. City Hall is closed to the public for in-person conversations and drop-offs, but we are still all working and available through phone and email and everything like that. The library has shut down and is subject to curbside pickup only, same as the senior center. They are not open to the public anymore. And our municipal courts have also been postponed. So there is going to be a change that you'll see in terms of government services over the next couple of weeks. But let's all knock on wood and hope that this is just the 2 weeks that were originally planned and see what happens after that. Some quick updates. The notification period for us to receive information of a LUBA appeal for the farm worker housing project has passed. The appeal would have been filed by November 6th, and we have yet to receive notification of anything. And so the decision of the appeal to the City Council stands. The project is approved, and we're currently in the process of beginning review of building and engineering plan checks as well. Next month, we have 2 items on the agenda. Unfortunately, because of this freeze, we are still intending it to be another Zoom meeting. One of them will be an annexation with a comprehensive plan map amendment. That map amendment just changes it from a low density designation to a mixed density designation, instead of something like this where it's industrial versus residential. And then we will also have a work session and a public discussion on the city's standing as a severe rent burden community. We are required to have a public meeting on that topic once a year to discuss constraints on housing developments and opportunities and how to address it so that we can decrease rent burden on our community. So those are the items left for the rest of the year, unless there's anything else that we would like to discuss.
Kelly, on the comment you made about changing it from low density to mixed density,
Yeah.
do we have anything, does the city need to do anything to be in compliance with Senate Bill 2000 that essentially kind of did away with the low density anyway?
We will have to do something per that bill. We need to update our code that says anywhere where a single family residential home can be built, we need to allow for a duplex to be built in the same manner, condition, and permitting procedure. So for example, in the low density residential zone, a single family home is permitted outright with 2 parking spaces allotted per property associated with that single family home, which means that per HB 2001, a duplex would now have to be permitted outright in that zone with only 2 parking spaces assigned to that property. So instead of a duplex per each unit requiring 2 parking spaces, the property as a whole would only have per unit, basically. And so there is a model ordinance that is being finalized by DLCD that we will likely use and tweak. We will be presenting that as a work session to give you guys an update on HB 2001 and 2003 and our requirements associated with all of that, and then provide you consideration of the ordinance next year before the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from the commissioners? Any questions? Anything else from your side, Kelly?
No, thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving, whatever those modified plans might look like.
All right. Hearing nothing more, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.